Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, we love seeing you every Thursday night on the Facebook, on YouTube. Love with the chats, so keep those coming. And you can always catch the chat replay or follow along later on your favorite podcast app. So let's see, you know me. Let me get my bumper up here. My name is John Rurock. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up for his introduction, let's go to RJ. How's it going, Robert?
There you go. It's going well, aside from my inability to switch windows for a second there. Robert Johnson, past master Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, and current sitting secretary at the premier Masonic Education Lodge in the state of Illinois, Space Novum 1183 in Libertyville, Illinois, and the host of the Whence Came You podcast. Good to be with you guys.
Excellent. Good to have you. Next up, Joe Martinez.
Hello. My name is Joe Martinez. It's on the screen. Wearing the least amount of jewelry I have probably ever worn in my life, because Jason's in a bad mood. So want to keep him even keeled. So Joe Martinez, current master, Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia, member of a bajillion other things. More pleased to be here than Robert is.
Even more pleased. Excellent. Last but not least for tonight, the one, the only, Jason Richards. Where's Jason? There he is.
There I am. I'm actually wearing jewelry tonight. My name is Jason Richards. I'm a past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C., and also a member of Lafayette number 79 under the Grand Lodge of Ohio.
Excellent. Full house tonight. And before we get into tonight's topic, definitely want to remind everyone that the patrons are what keeps the show going for many, many years to come. You guys are awesome. So if you want to help chip in, help keep the show going for a while, head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable, and that keeps the show going for many, many years. Makes Jason get upgrades for not parallels. What are you working on now? What's your Mac to Windows thing you're working on?
It's Parallels Desktop.
Oh, okay.
Parallel.
Yeah.
It's a Mac thing.
Joe, you and I are going to fight.
This is going to be a great
episode. Dude, I am
It's good that we're not
and quick. So if you want to talk about separating dudes from their Masonicness, we're going to do that outside.
We're going to have a throwdown. I like this. So yes, if you want to see, like Joe fights, then head over to the special hidden Facebook group for the Knights and Squires of TMR, and we'll record Joe and Jason going at it this weekend. So that'll be fun.
I think TikTok has plenty of those
rhetoric.
TikTok has plenty of those chubby 40-something dudes trying to get into a fight and get winded after 30 seconds.
Did you guys ever see bum fights? Do you remember bum fights? Like that was like 20 years ago. That was the thing. But I show my age. I show my cards. All right, here we go. Going on to one more introduction. Jason, what's going on in a couple weeks?
Couple weeks. Well, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks.
We have
a couple weeks. October 14th and 15th. The four guys you see here and a couple other great gentlemanly lads will be down in Greensboro, North Carolina at MasonicCon South, y'all. And that's not new information, right? We're going to be down there. We're all going to be speaking. It's going to be a great time. Go to MasonicConSouth.com and pick up your tickets, because the night before the conference, so Friday night, October 14th, we are going to do something very special as TMR. And for that night, we will actually be celebrating our 400th episode with a live, long-form, multi-hour episode.
What?
At an undisclosed location. The may or may not be, related to the Masonic Con, but it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be live. We're going to have guests coming in and out. Going to be talking about a whole lot of different stuff, because it's going to be literally a multi-hour show. So it'll be fun. Hope to see you there.
That's right, by popular request. Yeah, we're going to do long form. We're going to celebrate 400 episodes, and we're going to all be physically in the same place at the same time. So we thought, man, what, like, the stars are aligning to make this thing happen. So that'll be
So
super exciting.
there's a little bit of conjecture though, right? Because it's impossible that we could actually have 400 episodes, because the Apple Tree Tavern wasn't there. So the thing is that
I thought you were going to say
there
because 200 isn't there.
yeah. So
yeah,
this is the
it
thing.
is.
The Shriner episode, just that 200 never happened. So I
does
don't
it really
know if
count?
we can really
No,
call it
it's-
400.
Well, here's
But
the thing, though.
I'm gonna call Summers. I'm gonna call Summers and the other doctor who had a hand in this, and they're gonna come out and do a little thing and tell us why we're wrong.
Here's the thing, though. We had 2 episodes. We had like a 34 and a
And a half?
34.5.
That's right. I remember the half episodes.
So that takes care of it. And we totally did episode 200. It's just lost to the annals
Archives.
of history. Yes, it was
The
not
annals.
saved from inundation or conflagration. Apparently.
Indeed.
Hashtag where's 200. We promise 400
Hashtag
will be a lot more
Who
memorable.
cares? 400. Yes.
400.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop
You
living in the
realize-
past.
You realize 200 was, literally half the time that we've been on
Oh
the
my
air
gosh.
ago.
That was like yesterday.
Yeah.
Wow.
You guys had more hair.
Yes.
No, I have the same amount of hair. It's just a
You
bit.
do have wavy, luscious hair.
Whiter.
It's lovely,
Yes.
as always.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I had fewer kids back then. That is true. All right, let's get into tonight's topic. And this is one that's
Me
actually
too.
been listeners requested.
Actually, no.
No.
Are
Okay.
you still talking, John?
I'm
Am
trying.
I interrupting you?
I'm trying. This is going to be a
Are
great
you
episode.
getting frustrated?
You are.
Okay.
So tonight's episode was actually one requested by a listener like you. And
Shocking.
he said, here's something that I'm struggling with. Let me give you a little backstory of what's going on here. He messages me in the group, privately, and says, look, I've been working, with a brother, and, things were friendly at first. Unfortunately, found out through a lot of missteps and a lot of failings that this guy is kind of a jerk. And so what I'm holding right now is the fact that that he's a brother Mason, and I'm supposed to hold, brother Masons in a higher regard, and yet he's not really taking responsibility for his actions, and he's treating me bad, he's treating others bad. What do I do? So this is a really good area for discussion about how can you separate the person from Freemasonry? How can you separate the man from the values and principles of the fraternity that we're supposed to hold so dear? So tonight we're going to share lots of anecdotes about maybe some Masons that have gotten under our skin. Maybe, no names, right? Because we want to keep this, with the highest regard of peace and harmony. But we also want to tell the truth and say that there are times where you might not get along with every brother Mason. We have this great fraternity. Why do bad Masons exist? And then more importantly, how do we handle that? How do we hold that internally? How do we hold that as a fraternity?
Well, let me. There was 2 things you brought up there, so let's distinguish the 2.
There's many things. Go ahead, Joe.
I know. Let's stick. We only have an hour, so let's just work on 2.
For now.
Let's chip on those 2 little bits of our ashlar. So you brought up 2 things, John. One is I'm not getting along with a brother versus this person really doesn't live up to the ideals that he forswore he would, right? So those are, because, every single one of us get into arguments and disagreements with one another. That doesn't mean we hate each other and stuff, but I have to put that in a different bucket. God,
I hate you.
God, go sit in a fire pit. Okay.
Spicy.
So, there's, I hold those
You mean
people
your lap?
in a yes. Ooh, hashtag. But, I hold those people in a completely separate area than people that I'm like, how the hell did you become a Freemason? Like, you just don't live it, you don't speak it, you don't act like it, you act the fool on social media. Like
Right.
two completely different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
Jason's gotten pissed at me before. I totally know that. I'm very easy to enrage people. It's one of my skills in life, one of my God-given gifts. But we make up at the end though. But what do you do about that person that's like, I have a hard time sitting in lodge with you because I know you're completely full of crap. Like, so two separate conversations I think we need to have. Go, discuss.
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the things that I said while I was still on mute was, why, it was a play off of what John said, but it's, why do, not why do bad Masons exist, but why do bad people who are Masons
Oh,
exist?
that's kind of deep, right there.
And that gets back to what Joe was saying about those brethren who do not truly inculcate the high standards that we promise and swear to uphold.
I think in the broader context of this whole thing, when I became a Mason, one of the things that I had noticed was exactly what you guys have been talking about. And because Freemasonry has been allowed to become different things to different people, and we've had sovereign grand commanders in certain jurisdictions who have said things like, the degrees in Masonry are just what you go through in order to get to the good stuff. Those kinds of comments and those kinds of treatments of this initiatory society, not social club, not dinner club, those kinds of comments undercut what we actually are. And what that does is it enables people to just consider this like, that's just the antiquated verbiage we use. It really doesn't mean anything today. I'm sure you guys have heard things like in Lodge, like, oh, it means this, but we actually don't do that anymore, whatever, right? It's a whole system of undercutting the idea of honor and integrity. It's people consider it, oh, it's this dress up play thing, but it's not this dress up play thing. Like, this is a real thing. This is a real obligation. These are real charges we are holding you to.
Right.
You have up to this point proven that
you
you
swear
are
an oath to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so to be
it's a system of morality. We're a little nebulous on what that morality is. It's not perhaps codified nearly as granularly as it is in a lot of religious interpretation.
We have within this fraternity really something that's pretty unique, and that's this idea that like we're so traditional. We're viewed by our own members as like everything Masonry is sacrosanct and we have no flaws. And they think that Freemasonry is perfect when we know that Masonry is not faultless. Like, we sit back and we say things that, like, even things like I've said before, like we'll say famous articles by great Masons say, try Freemasonry to fix Freemasonry. And I think what's interesting about that is like this idea of falling back on these laurels of trying Freemasonry. Even I've said that. But what I mean by it is like, help Freemasonry become better by sticking to the things we actually say it is within the ritual and not treat it as just this passive things we say.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I come from on this. And the way I see things is that the background behind this is that I'm an idealist, and I understand that like there are a lot of philosophies in my life that I try to stick to as best as possible, right? Obviously, we're all fallible. We're all going to make some mistakes now and then, but the goal is to just try to get back on the horse and try again, right? So whether it's in my professional career, of course, I've written a whole book on Agile stuff, right? There's a lot of people. Kevin Homan loves to send me memes about how awful Agile is, and I just go down and every time and say, no, they're not doing this right. They're not doing this right, because there's the goal, and then there's how people screw it up. And the same is true in religion. The same is true in work ethics and processes and procedures, and the same is even more true in the fraternity that we have, right? Where we have a system of morality that has specific things that we must learn and pass in order to be advanced into further degrees of light, education, knowledge, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. So again, to your point, Robert, is like, why do we even go through all this mess if we're not going to stick to it? Because we've already been told where the finish line is.
Well, to that point, I mean, that kind of talks about a more systemic issue, right? And I know I'm gonna see hate mail about this, right? Because as Robert said, now in the current state of our craft, it really, unfortunately, is, Freemasonry is many things to many different people, right? And I would say for a good long time, it probably was like that, right? There were different. I know you've talked about membership so many times, and there are valleys and peaks in terms of the type of people that represent the craft, in different times in history. But I have to, having read things about Masonry and having been a Freemason for a little bit, I don't know if it's just us that think like, this is the time and place where change needs to happen. But I guess there have always been people like that have been, lamenting it or crying about it or writing about it, talking about the current state of the craft. I think of people like Wilmshurst, that wrote when we had the most members ever, right? One of the big booms in Freemasonry. And what was he complaining about? Like, well, all of his books talked about the people who are coming into the craft suck. All they care about is wearing fancy clothes and drinking a lot, and it's a social club. This was 100 years ago, know.
Yeah, why do we do what we do if we're just here to just hang out and have dinner, right?
Right.
Green
so
beans?
it's not a new.
But so the broader question, right? Like when people will come to us all the time, right? They always say, "Oh, go be the change, man," and I always say, "Well, what the hell do you think we're doing?" Right? What do you think we're doing when in today's Freemasonry, we've got men who are kind of looking for the right men? And while we're so active, the listeners, I know you're active too. Like we're all so active and we all see it, right? And we have to triage how we handle these things. They're like, "Oh, I can't believe you aired this dirty laundry." And it's like, well, we tried the minimal things, right? We tried whispering good counsel. We tried,
Yeah.
We tried bringing
Raise
up
it
the
up the
issue.
chain of command.
Yep. Then
Everybody
we
in the
bring
chain
charges.
of command is the problem.
Yeah, right. Because we've got the big two. We've got cronyism and nepotism at the top, But this thing is like, then what do you go do next, right? Then it becomes legislation. Now you're trying to pass actual laws to make Freemasonry
fix it by bureaucracy, not by extolling and applying the virtues.
Yep. And so now what do we have is like this going all the way back. Everybody's like, "Oh, well, be the change. Don't come into me with a problem without having a possible solution." Right. And the solution to
Maybe
all
the
this is, of
possible
course,
solution is demitting.
or expelling those individuals.
Yes, that too.
You actually touched, and I know we've spoken about this. Jason, I know was saying it kind of in jest, right? If it's so bad, just quit and leave. But and at the end of the day, this is a volunteer.
I wasn't joking. There,
I know.
That's what's happening with NPDs. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to a point, yeah. I mean, and going back to what I was going to say earlier was when I was referencing Wilmshurst was, look at those people who are after a year or two, if you go by the John Ruark math 2040, we're losing almost 3 every time we gain 1. What is the investment on that 1 that we're gaining, right? How many of them are receiving all of their degrees in a single afternoon with sandwiches in between? How many of them are actually told what Freemasonry should be and that they can come try and bring it back to that state again? Or how many are joining to hey, I'm gonna join and I'm gonna get my degrees really quick, and I'm gonna go join the shrine, or I'm gonna go join the Scottish Rite, or I'm gonna go join the, the boozy club, or whatever they really join for. Again, I just keep harkening back to that. People join for many different reasons. I think that's a systemic problem. It really is.
When I was master, I joke that halfway joke that my lodge excelled at performing courtesy work for the shrine because we had so many candidates coming in who they're like, okay, raise them because we got to get them into, the clown, club or whatnot.
The fundamental question, right? Like, as we're talking about these things, and we can talk trash with the best of anybody. We're not above it. We all do it, right? But it is something that we're working on, right? Like, it's why we wouldn't maybe name names in an episode or something. But
I'm not working on it, Robert.
Well, I'm trying.
We can get close.
Like, there are people, I will say, that I vehemently disagree with all the time. But for whatever, through the grace of God, I've been able to draw a line in the sand. And when I hang out with this person, we both know we totally disagree politically, ideologically, everything. But we both agree on one thing, and that's like Masonic education. And like, we're still great brothers. I still hug this person. Like, this person would drive 200 miles to change my tire still. But when you don't have that, like, going back to the description of this episode, right? We asked, how do we react to a brother that doesn't live up to our expectations? And then that follow-up is like, how do you adjust? Is it up to us to adjust to that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or what? Like,
I mean,
how do we even start with the reaction process? I don't even know. How do you validate your feeling?
I can tell you, just having lived it in a short span of time, right? So I'd say across a 5-year window. Well, I mean, before I say that, let's go back to what you were talking about. You were talking about an example of someone who actually has those Masonic ideals, but may differ in your sentiments politically or philosophically, and that's okay. That's not a separation in the brotherhood. That's just, you're different people, but at least you all come around at that altar of Freemasonry, right? And you put all that crap outside. So that's I have no problem with that, and I never will have a problem with that. I wouldn't want to be in the echo chamber of people like me because I'm loud and obnoxious. But it's the other side of that. It's the people who are prominent Freemasons, and they're super racist on social media, or they're bigots, or they're sexist, or they're making really awful comments. And I'm like, people know you're a Freemason and you're posting this kind of crap on your page. Like, how am I supposed to respond to that? How am I supposed to think of you as an upright human being? Or, people, the majority of Masons that are out there, that cannot separate political discourse from not being a crappy person. Like, they intertwine those two things to the point where it really is their entire identity. How do you deal with that? It's so hard to, because they're public about it, right?
All right. So what does the ritual say, right? The ritual says you're supposed to admonish them of their error and aid them in a reformation. Do we do that enough?
But what?
I think we try.
Well, again, yeah.
I have seen, like, we've all been in back channel conversations. We're like, oh my God, our brother did this thing. What do we do? I mean, I have had conversations with Brother Scott Duvall and my other close confidants in Lodge, where somebody in our own grand jurisdiction who has a title, will just leave it wide out open. So it could be any number of 200 things, from sword bearer to the Grand Master, who knows? But this one person posted something, and he's known because he's got a prominent position. So he's followed by many people, and he's known in cross jurisdictions. And he posted something that was derogatory toward, I'll tell you what it was. It was one of those derogatory things about Kamala Harris, committing certain acts with individuals in order to rise to the top. Now, regardless of whatever you think about that, it was not something a Mason should post. That's not something he should post. Like, I don't really care. You know, I was told a long time ago as a DDGM by my boss that, yeah, you're an American, you have free speech, but you're also under the Grand Lodge of the state of Illinois, which means you kind of don't have free speech.
Mm-hmm.
You are responsible, especially when you hold, what do we say in Masonic ritual? Leadership is through holding the keys to men's hearts. How can you put something out there willingly to come off in ways that are very problematic? Not only
Polarizing.
The rhetoric is bad, it's borderline just crude, which is locker room humor. I'm not going to lie, we all do locker room humor, but the thing is that we don't do that out in the public,
Right?
and you know what, like, my wife doesn't need to see it. She doesn't need to see that on your Facebook wall. We're friends and stuff, and she's met you and shook your hand, and she sees that. She doesn't want to see that. So what do? I sent him a private text, SMS, and was like, dude, can you, just because, you know, just, it's not a good look. And he deleted it.
I say that's good,
And
that's
no big deal.
That's the easiest
Best case
way
scenario.
to, you know, to help a brother
That is.
get back on course. As it should.
How
be.
many times have you all done that just to get almost literally spat in the face by that brother?
More times
And-
than
Like,
RJ's.
We're all
outcome.
raising our hands over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't
And
tell
so
me what
that's
to
the
do.
other
that's a
thing,
really
Jake.
hard thing.
Yeah.
And when you not only get spat on by that brother, but by the chain of command.
Mm.
This brother called me and said I was posting inappropriate stuff, blah, 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 blah. And then I get the phone call.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I see where we are. Back to that old, you know, cronyism and nepotism thing.
Yeah. But again, it goes back to the point that we have these standards, both explicit and implicit, that we're holding ourselves to as Masons. And when someone is not meeting those standards, you know, like, then what happens? Okay, you try to admonish them of their error, doesn't work so well. Do you follow this chain of command thing? Because, you know, at least in Virginia, kind of what they recommend is you deal with the brother, then you deal with the worshipful master of their lodge, and then you raise it up to the DDGM of that district, this district deputy grand master of that district, and then, you know, take it all the way up to a Grand Lodge committee if you really absolutely need to. But you go in that order, right? Which is actually, to be honest, a really good leadership tactic, right? You want to, if you have an issue with someone at work, don't go run up the chain right away. First and foremost, try to resolve it at the grassroots level. Try to solve it where the problem lies, and then only when you fail, then go up a level or two. So, I mean, is it that easy?
But
I'm
a lot less idealistic than you.
I'm just telling you the way it's supposed to be.
You all
I know,
keep mispronouncing libertarian.
Ha!
Oh.
Solve it at the local level. We don't need federal rules.
But I mean, in reality, though, and while it sounds great on paper and it sounds very democratic and it sounds like a process that should work, you know, going back to RJ's point, the bulk of it, and I hate being so pessimistic, but the bulk of it, when that chain or when that group of higher ups is just in a sea of cronyism and nepotism, you know, what's the ROI on going down that road to begin with?
Keep going,
you know,
right?
Am I gonna stir that pot and I'm just gonna put a target on myself and get nothing in return, or do I just write that brother off? Right? Like, those are my two choices.
Which is where I wanted to go with that. So, again, the next part of the conversation is what happens when all of your avenues don't work out. You have to write them off somehow.
Disengage and avoid. I've left I
does
have
that look like,
left
Jason?
Masonic organizations.
Yeah, tell me
Um,
what that looks like.
you know, and this is something that I know I do too quickly and too readily, um, because I am not a fan of conflict, regardless of how much garbage I give to Joe and the other hosts of this show, on air especially. Uh, I tend to draw back and disengage and avoid certain people as much as possible. After something like whispering good counsel goes awry, because at that point I've tried to come alongside you, and if you misuse my brotherly generosity, then like I won't ever let you know it, but I will just draw back, and you will you will just not hear from me again.
Yeah.
I left my AMD council when I was um, senior warden, or the senior warden equivalent, because there were personalities in that council that I knew that if I did not leave, things would come to a head, probably during my year as Sovereign Master, and there was a huge potential for things to get very inappropriate and unbrotherly.
Mhm.
And so instead,
In
I
fact,
chose to leave.
yeah. In fact, so that was um, the same council that I'm still currently in. And actually, I was there that night when Jason submitted his demit, and it looked a little something like this. There it is. There's Jason, actually. And
One of the greatest meme formats of the century. So you talked about the reaction. We talked about kind of what we do sometimes to mitigate these things, and sometimes I think the best idea is, as Jason has pointed out, in he said, "I don't really let you know. I just kind of disengage." But I think if you're a cognizant and thoughtful person, you have noticed the disengagement, and through a process of
True.
reflection, you might think to yourself, "Damn, I haven't heard from Jason in a minute. I should probably check in on that fella." And when you do, maybe it happens. Maybe you figure it out.
Why has
Or
he
maybe
unfriended me?
why is he unfriended me? Why has he
Eh,
blocked me? All
that
those
doesn't
things.
happen a
I mean,
lot.
It's
I mean,
it,
it
So
does.
it
It does,
does.
though, right?
It,
a
but
lot
yeah, I
of
mean, I
those,
kind of go ahead. Don't make a face.
so a
Go
lot
ahead.
of those, so a lot of those brethren
Go ahead, though.
who, at least anecdotally, I have experienced, you know, reacting very poorly to whispering good counsel, are the same brethren who lack a lot of self-awareness, or perhaps are a bit too absorbed with the self to really notice a difference.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
they're
That's
already
fair.
not introspective enough to keep their passions within due bounds, right? um,
Well,
Um,
is it that, or is it to? Sorry, is it to the point where, because I know kind of sort of the people that Jason's talking about. How much of it is? Yeah, there's certain people that are like, well, shoot, where'd Jason go? He's not around anymore. But then there's other people that are like, Jason's a quitter, like he couldn't hack it, and
yeah, look at
he
that.
can't roll with, he can't roll with the punches. So, and then you have that again, that title chasing, braggadocious, ego driven conversation of, well, Jason's not with us anymore because he couldn't cut the mustard, and I keep going back to,
I got
what
nothing to
very
prove.
wise people have. Exactly right. And it's I keep thinking back to, because years ago I was that, I wasn't the whisperer of good counsel. I would scream at you and throw crap at you, and in that same vein you'd get the good counsel, but I do it in a really bad way. But I'm kind of getting into a point in my Masonic career where I'm definitely leaning more towards what Jason said, where it's like, you know what? I'm not getting paid to be here. Apparently I'm here because I want to be here. And if I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here anymore, and I won't be here. I'll go somewhere else.
And I don't have
if
to
there's a
be.
place,
Right.
exactly, right. You're not a lesser person for it. You're not a lesser Mason. You're not you're probably happier, spending a little more time at home, and you're not surrounding yourself with people that just piss you off constantly, So, I mean, these are all positives we're talking about here. And, just to talk about
Yeah.
my personal example, I can tell you right now that I'm getting to the point again in my Masonic career where it's like, wow, I'm really noticing that I don't want to be around you people. You are not the type of Masons that I thought you were. And you're starting to make me not want to be a part of the place where you are at, whether it's a body or an organization as a whole or what have you. And I'm starting to notice like, well, I want to keep doing this, but I don't want to do it with you. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go elsewhere.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's also why a lot of affinity lodges start. I think that's why, new lodges spring up. They try to create the thing that they want, and it doesn't always work out as well as they want, because then it becomes oh, you think you're better than us, you think you need to have, your own special club, right? Like, you can't win. You can't win.
I have
Well,
heard
and those
all of
old
those
brothers
things.
catch wind of it and feel scorned. And then there are brothers I know currently who are running smear campaigns against other brothers because they went and said, you know what, this doesn't align to our values. We're going to go over here instead.
This is fundamentally like what happened with Space Novum. There was and it wasn't necessarily driven by brothers that we hung out with that had bad attitudes or whatever. It was more along the lines of just wanting to be a lodge that was built on self-sustaining ideals and education. And if you don't want those things, that's okay. And oh, by the way, if you want to be a member, you're not allowed to leave your home lodge. We all acknowledge this thing, and what has come from that is and because we also have this policy that nobody tells anybody who's a member. I mean, people can look it up if they want to, but they generally don't know how. We hear all of the trash talk. Oh, that's that millionaire's lodge. Oh, that's that lodge. They do this, this, and this. And like, it's hilarious. And generally speaking,
Happened with
it's not
Patriot.
very, yeah. So
Oh yeah.
when you guys talked about like, what do you do, right? And you left the council and your AMD chapter. I've gone into, like, I've traveled, within my district to go to a meeting, and I see who's there, and then we go into the meeting and I notice that brother's there, and I'm like, oh, my every intent was to leave before the opening, because I don't want to sit and lodge with somebody who I would consider that, breaks their obligations and violates the charges.
Mhm.
And yet the lodge opened. So I say, Worship Master, can I be excused? And he'll say, what do you want to be excused for? And then I just tell him, I say, I'm not going to sit in the lodge with Masons and individuals who've broken their obligations and violated their charges. And then at that point, I've said it. I haven't identified
Boom.
anybody, and I
Mic
leave.
drop.
And
Zing.
that's won me no favors.
Yes, but at the same time,
Right.
So like, and so here's the thing, right? To use a horrible analogy, right? What happens when Atlas shrugs in Masonry, right? Where all the good Masons
Masonry
quit.
suffers.
Right, because the ones
Masonry
who stay are the bad ones, because they are fine. They're not being held accountable to their actions outside of Masonry, outside of the lodge room. It's all part of the this is just, again, I'm speaking hyperbole, but let's just assume it's all part of that nepotism and the good old boys network, right? And so those who are really trying to better themselves in Masonry, apply the tools, work on themselves, see their own failings. When you try to correct someone and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to give up trying to help this brother. It's probably just best if I leave. What's changed, right? You've actually weakened, if not Masonry, at least that lodge or that appendant body by you stepping aside.
Then let it die. That is the one thing I've started to learn in these last couple of years is, I've helped brothers start new organizations, new bodies, new groups. Won't get specific with them. And then the first thing that people will say to me, well, what about your old one? What about them? Let them die. Let them go. It's not, things can't be propped up by one or two people. We've all been members of organizations that if one or two people leave, it's just going to come crumbling down. And we have to start getting accustomed to that being the norm, Something falls
But
apart
Joe,
and breaks down, you build something new. What?
so what
What?
happens to those people when that thing dies? Do they come on over to your new thing? Like, I feel like this can be very much so recognizing we have a duty to protect, our own mental health, but then also this duty to a fraternal organization we're trying to better, as well as ourselves.
Let me
I
give you
feel
a real
like
world example.
Okay.
Let me give you a real world example. I'm not going to name names, but everybody knows I'm master of my lodge. I'm not the most popular master of my lodge that has ever graced the four walls of that building.
I'm not naming
okay?
names, but let's just say my senior warden. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, it's I'm definitely not the most popular. You know, I have a certain vision and style of what I think Freemasonry is, and I will be absolutely frank with you, because I was frank with them, that I'd say 3/4 of the members of my lodge don't agree or don't care about that vision, but the other 25% do. And those are the ones that I've invested lots of time and lots of energy and lots of
And they're the ones who show up.
and they're the ones that show up, and they're the ones that get something out of it, and they're the ones that are keeping that flame alive. I was thinking about what you guys were saying about, hey, a bunch of guys go and start something new. It honestly, it really is an American thing to hate that. You know what I mean? Like, go look at the United Grand Lodge of England. They have thousands of lodges composed of 25, 30 members tops, right? I mean, even I was actually doing correspondence courses, Masonic ones, because I'm a loser, and that's what I do with my spare time. And I was reading the Grand Lodge of Virginia book, the Methodical Digest, the law book.
Woo!
And it still says it in there. If your lodge gets too numerous, it's your duty, if you have too many people there. And it goes back to psychology. You can only be best friends with X number of people, right? You can't be best
Dunbar's
friends
number.
with 200. Exactly. But it even says it right there in the Methodical Digest. If your numbers get too numerous, it's your duty to go form something new, break off and start something smaller. But again, it's that American thing where, we don't like to let things die or don't like to let things change. And it's anathema to us. And I think that's the biggest source of heartburn. You're on mute.
You're muted, Jason.
You're muted.
It was brilliant, whatever you just said.
It was
Also
profound, brah.
comes from a bias that isn't necessarily backed up by data, because it says as you grow in number, break off. It doesn't say as you dwindle in number to the point where you are unsustainable and only getting people through guilt and coercion, maybe it's time to die. So when that was written, the writers were still looking at this Masonic trajectory that they thought was sustainable, right?
Forever.
And yes, we're just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. We'll never have
Point
to change
taken.
and shift.
Yeah. Point taken.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had several points, and you only took the one, so that's frustrating.
Well, you were muted the rest of the time. So
Point number 2, Jason.
That's true.
Learn technology.
You should have known.
Parallels. I got
Point number 2,
today.
Jason. Anything else? Or did you just
Point number 2 is Joe's mad.
Joe's a jerk face.
No.
He is. Much so. I'm glad I don't have to spend all weekend with him.
So can you agree to disagree with a Mason, right? That seems to be the kind of the best place, because we're taught to keep harmony, right? That we want to preserve peace and harmony. We want to make sure that we make sure that the fraternity doesn't suffer as a result of our conflicts with each other. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So sometimes here's the downside. Now you have to actually turn it inward and say, well, what could I have done better? Because that's really the inner work that you're supposed to be doing, that you're supposed to be working on.
It's completely
RJ disagrees.
baloney.
Ha!
Okay, so where do you start? With a progressive moral science. In a progressive moral science, to agree to disagree is like I mean, to essentially quote a direct slide, it's a negative mindset that prevents progress. So what I mean is agreeing to disagree doesn't do anything for anyone. In fact, if I say, hey, killing these people is a bad idea, and you say, oh, it's a good idea, and we just agree to disagree, and then whether it happens or not, we just like kind of hang out. So my question is, agree to disagree, sure, maybe on some things, but when those things take a toll on the craft, at whose expense are we agreeing to disagree here? Who is the loser? 1,000 people get together and they want to paint a room. We've said this before. You're going to paint the room. It's going to be beige. Nobody wants a beige room. Okay? You cannot always agree to disagree. In fact, I hate agreeing to disagree. Like, pick a side and stick with it and die on your hill.
Mm-hmm.
We have a democratic republic, and I agree that we come down to a vote, and it's the will of the lodge, and the master is a benevolent dictator here. But also, you vote with your feet. And if you don't want to do something, don't do it, don't go. And you know what? It's just like the more people that want the right thing, it's going to be effervescent. But you gotta realize that every vote counts. There are no wasted votes.
So I keep thinking back to the actual Joe's soda is effervescent.
I'm going to drink something effervescent.
SodaStream.
Sponsored by SodaStream.
Oh, jeez. Now I got to include the paid promotion. I keep thinking back to...
They haven't paid us yet.
Yeah, it's true.
I haven't got no money.
I keep thinking back to the original source of this is how do we deal with one person and agreeing to disagree? And I had a really good point, but Joe's SodaStream comment just threw me way off. So I lost.
Then was it that good of a point?
It was the best point. It was the best point, actually.
I would vote no.
You're going to remember it during the car ride tomorrow.
Good thing this is not a democratic republic.
No,
Joe, what do you want?
Forehead. I was going to say, this person who lives in my house who is a lot smarter than me, her name is
Your
Barb.
wife?
She's awesome.
There's
My wife.
so many to choose.
I called it.
She loves to text me pearls of wisdom while we're on the show because she watches the show, and that's awesome. But she texted, and I think this is kind of the crux of the issue. She said, "But you're also supposed to help men become better." And just let's touch that a little bit. So if you get down to it, we're not supposed to help crappy men become better. We're supposed to help good men become better, right? So that goes back to the how'd you get here in the first place kind of thing. And I think that's really one of the more systemic issues that we have and that nobody's going to solve, in the 12 minutes we have left.
So, one thing that I thought about earlier in the episode too is about the no true Scotsman logical fallacy, right? Because there are levels of being a jerk, right? That are not complying with our morals and principles, right? There's some that just don't get Masonry at all. There's some that just have their own taints in their character. But when you talk about again when I'm trying to think about how and Jason and I have said this before. That like we like Christianity. There are just a lot of Christians that we can't stand, right? There's,
like 99.9 to infinity %.
I love Freemasonry. There's just a few Masons that I can't stand, right? So again, it's separating your own perception of the standard they're supposed to be at compared to where they are.
So what you're saying is we're just united in our misery. Is that what you're saying? That's how we found each other, is in our times of misery and woe. Yeah. It's like, oh crap, there's someone that's just as miserable and shitty as me. So I'm gonna go hug you.
Shared pain and
bring it in.
Shared pain and tribulation is a very catalyzing factor for tribalism.
It's like metaconscious Stockholm syndrome. It's like, oh, we've all been beaten together, just in different cities. I'm gonna come hug you and love you.
Oh, geez. Good
I
times.
mean, you
Good
just
times.
look at just about every ethnic conflict that's taken place in the past, like, 100 to 200 years, and that's basically how it starts.
That'll narrow it down. All right, so we're at that point. Final question of the week. Final question. We'll go around, and tonight's final question will be picked by Joe. Joe's going to tell us what the final question will be, because
Ooh,
yeah, I'm going
right
to mix
on.
it up.
Okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
So, all right. So I'm going to put y'all on the spot then. So, final question of the week is crap. I have a couple of good ones, but
That's
I
not
don't
a
want to.
question.
That's a
No,
statement.
I don't want to get too. I don't want to get too specific. So, okay. So, if you were faced with just an onslaught of these unchangeable, unbendable, people that you really don't want to associate with, that you have a loose connection to because you both pay dues, would you stick it out, or would you demit and quit and go find your own path? Like, what's keeping you in Freemasonry outside of all the junk that is contained within it now? Boom.
Jason.
Jason, go.
What keeps me in Freemasonry today is my family history and the network that I have uh, built and gained of Masons online through TMR, fans of the show, Refracted Light, Historical Light. I have a lot of very close friends who are Masons who I only see, once every couple of years, and that's because we're all living the virtual Masonic education dream together. And so, the fact of the matter is, like, life is too precious, and I spending time with my family is too precious. And so if I'm going to dread absolutely dread going to a meeting that only happens once a quarter, like what's happening in my AMD council, it's not worth it. I can find that fulfillment elsewhere, and it frees me up to spend more time doing things I care about.
Excellent answer. All right, over to Robert.
That's a really awesome question. So, what keeps me in Freemasonry, I think, are the community of brotherhood and family that we have within, not just this group, but listeners to the show, the people who we see at the conferences, the people who are working in the quarries every single day to make their lodge meeting even better, and looking and pretending they didn't see the master of their lodge doing, tapping their watch because they're taking too long on education. Those are the reasons why I really stay in the fraternity. I mean, I'm embedded. I'm dedicated to education. I'm a lifelong learner, and I find Freemasonry as an initiatory path something that um, I personally identify with in ways that other systems don't engage me like. So I love it, and that's why I stay. But also, this idea that I could just walk away at any given moment. I've mentioned this quote before, but my good friend used to be I think he was the chair of our leadership committee here in the Grand Lodge of Illinois. He walked away from Freemasonry completely. And he said, I walked away. His exact quote was that I care so much for the fraternity and its ideals is why I had to leave it. And his point was that the way Freemasonry operates today is not how it is supposed to run and is outlined and what it's supposed to stand for. We operate like a loose standard of what we call to. And so he felt so strongly that he's not been back to lodge in 3.5 years. You know, he's a past right worshipful area guy. He's a leadership guy. You know, probably would have ended up in the Grand Line, but he left because he felt that the craft didn't live up to its own expectations. And yet, by leaving, he's honoring the craft by listening to what it tells you to do. Right? So it's like at any given point, if the organization becomes so askew to what it was supposed to be, you have a duty and a responsibility to leave it. And so within that, that's what he did. He left.
If you truly love
I
something,
haven't
let it
done
go. And then if masonry comes back to you, then it was meant
It
to
was
be.
meant to be. Yeah. And I haven't left because I feel that we just have too much yet left to try. You know, like I've got 5 more batteries that I have to flip flop to make sure they're in the right, you know, polarity before I just start taking this toy apart. You know, I've got a lot left to try to see what sticks here before we just abandon ship. So I guess I hope that doesn't come across as like apathetic or anything.
No, not
You
at
know,
all.
if anything, I'm trying to convey that I'm dedicated.
Yeah, you're in it to win it. I love it.
That's right.
All right, Joe, I'm going to turn the question back on you. Given all
Fine.
that, what keeps you in masonry?
Green beans.
Yes.
No, wrong. What keeps me in it?
We knew it.
Ha 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 ha. Anyway, what keeps me in it is honestly that small minority, right? It's that, you know, I'm looking out at a room full of people, half of them who are bored, half of them who are looking at their watch, and you see that one person who is transfixed or is totally paying attention or has questions and is super enthusiastic about the craft and joined for the right reasons. It's that one person everywhere you go that just keeps me motivated to keep doing this, because at the end of the day, it really is it's a volunteer organization. You do not get paid to be here. You give up time, energy, money, and you know, sweat equity in getting rid of the crappy parts of yourself along with some of your best friends. But you don't need to be there. So, you know, I've come to the realization that there are 2 groups of people in this craft. There are members and there are masons. The members keep the lights on, and they keep the fancy buildings or the wood panel buildings, whichever you prefer. But then there are people who actually cared when they took their obligations, and they took those words to heart, and they used those words to be that better person, be that better father, be that better brother or son, or member of their community, you know, living those ideals, not just putting a bumper sticker on or you know, one of those square and compasses on your window, but actually living it. So it's for that really small minority of people that are still doing it is why I probably you know, won't leave anytime soon, you know, maybe unless I'm forced to. So 4 more years. Woo.
Yeah, we need to have a talk.
Oh.
You're being forced to leave.
Oh. Well, okay.
Just before elections. All right. Sorry to drop the bad news, but we'll have a conversation in the green room. Not at all. Not at all. So, my thoughts.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, my thoughts on this. What keeps me in Freemasonry? Idealism. Like, again, at the end of the day, I admire what Freemasonry stands for, and so I want to try to live up to that standard. It's a good standard. It's held the test of time. I see the value for me. I see it as a good system of morality, along with other inspirations in my life, to try to merge these together into a system that works for me to turn inward and look for myself. Also, what keeps me in the fraternity? It's all emotional. It's not logical, right? Why should I take time away from my family? Why should I, just hang out with guys and listen to the reading of the minutes? It makes no logical sense sometimes, but emotionally, it's good to be with brothers you've not seen in a while. It's good to shake hands, see how people are doing, right? Really connect at a personal level. And so I keep the hope that others will actually try to apply the lessons that we are taught, right? Once you become a Mason, one thing we didn't talk about, we mentioned it in a couple episodes way back, but basically, wouldn't it be nice if we could re-up our certifications as Master Masons, right? Just to kind of make sure that other than just paying dues, we're actually doing the things that we keep saying that we do. Do we hold ourselves to that standard? Do we pass a recertification? That would be interesting to see what the attrition rate would be of those guys who come in, really don't live those values, but yet as long as they pay the very cheap dues every year, they're a Mason for life. Wouldn't it be nice to have something that really helps reinforce the standards that we're trying to set in this fraternity? But that's why I give Masonic presentations. I want to make sure that, and upon reflection, one thing I did notice is if you look at the list of the topics that I give, if you go to MasonicInstruction.com and look for my name, you'll see a lot of the presentations that I give actually reinforce and double down on a specific Masonic point or charge to apply the lessons of Freemasonry in a very specific way. So I don't give presentations because I love to talk about George Washington. I give presentations because here's this interesting thing about our philosophy that we really should look at, and we really should examine it, and we should hold it and savor it instead of brushing it off. And so specifically to the question that brought us to this episode tonight, what do you do with that brother who's not living their life as a Mason? The real short answer is love him. Love him like a brother. Real families have dysfunctional, relationships. And so that doesn't mean that we should give up on them. That does mean that we have to not only hold ourselves accountable, hold ourselves to a higher standard, but, admit that we're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes and still hold them as a brother at the end of the day, regardless of how the outcome comes out. So that's my advice. It's been a really, really fun episode. There's a lot of tension here. I can feel it, but we've learned a lot. We've shared a lot. And I agree with you, Joe. I can see you in the preview window. With that, I want to thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in just, 2 more episodes. We're going to have episode 400, and I can't wait for that one. So have a good night.
Y'all.
And keep searching for more light. Have a good night.
Y'all.